Before we get started, I want to encourage all of you to enjoy this logo while it lasts, because this is the last time you'll ever be seeing it. As of tomorrow, the channel will be completely renamed, so let's get started. Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel. So I've gotten the worst of list out of the way. Every year I always get it out of the way so I can try to think back on the previous year on a positive note. And no better thing to do than talk about what I consider to be the best movies of 2022. Last year was an absolutely fantastic year for movies, and I debated back and forth, should I try to be more clear and just do a top 10? Do I want to cheat and do a top 20, or do I want to do what I did in 2019, 2021 and just do a top 15? I ultimately decided on the latter, so let's get started with my picks for the best movies of 2022. Like I said at the beginning of my worst of list, 2022 is probably the best year for movies since 2017, the year where I ended up doing a top 20 list. And there were so many movies that I wanted to include when I originally wanted to do a top 20 that I ultimately had to cut out. And these were some tough cuts, but I wanted to mention them. Last year was an absolutely incredible year for both the horror genre and whodunits. And Scream 5 and Bodies, Bodies, Bodies are prime examples of both those genres. I really enjoyed both those movies, and it kind of hurt me that I had to cut both of them out. Even though last year was not really Pixar's best year, I really did enjoy Turning Red. I wish it got a theatrical release because I found it to be really charming, had a unique animation style compared to a lot of the other DreamWorks movies, and I'm excited to see what Domee Shi has in store for the rest of her career at Pixar. The Batman was a movie that I really wasn't thinking about putting on my best of the year list, because when I saw it, I liked it, but I wasn't in love with it. I think there are far better Batman movies out there, but there's no denying that it's still really good. Even though the first hour dragged for me, after the big chase with the Batmobile, that's when the movie officially kicked into high gear, and I like it enough to where I bought it on Blu-ray. So just because I didn't love it like everyone else doesn't mean I didn't like it. The next three movies are movies that I really thought hard about on, do I want to keep them or should I just cut them all together? Because I ultimately enjoyed a lot of these movies. I think if I had made a top 20, they would have stuck around. And those movies are The Fabelmans, The Menu, and Apollo 10.5. And actually, those three movies, even though they came out last year, I still plan on reviewing them. I did a YouTube short review for The Menu after I saw it, but never got around to a full review. I'll rectify that this year. And then lastly, we have a movie that I didn't think would be good at all, and almost made my best of the year list until I just decided, you know what? I saw several other movies that had come out since then that I enjoyed more, and that would be Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers. I didn't think at all, based on the trailers, that this movie would be good, but I ultimately liked it. And yet, that is not the biggest surprise that came out this year. For those of you who are new to the channel, whenever I do a best of the year list, before I actually get into the ranking, I always try to single out a movie that I didn't really have any expectations for or wasn't looking forward to at all in the slightest, but saw the movie and ended up thinking, wow, that was actually really good, and I enjoyed it. And I have two movies this year as my biggest surprises of 2022, and ironically, both of these movies came out the same weekend. I'm of course talking about the double feature that is Ambulance and Sonic the Hedgehog 2. It's no secret I'm not a huge fan of Michael Bay's movies, but when I saw The Ambulance, I was pleasantly surprised at how fun it was. It's the closest that we'll ever get to a live-action Grand Theft Auto movie, because it's got an endless car chase, tons of explosions, fantastic action sequences, even though the characters aren't really that deep, and a lot of the humor is very much that crass frat boy sense of humor that Michael Bay thinks is funnier than it actually is, I still enjoyed it. In fact, I enjoyed it enough to where I actually own it on Blu-ray. So if me owning a Michael Bay movie on Blu-ray does not signal how great of a year last year was for movies, I don't know what will. And then in terms of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, that was a movie that I didn't have many expectations for, mainly because I didn't like the first Sonic film. Thought it was completely generic and just a basic road trip movie. The trailers for Sonic 2, however, looked like something that I would actually like. It seemed more faithful to the video games, and it was. In my opinion, it is the best video game adaptation that we have in terms of movies. I haven't seen stuff like Castlevania on Netflix. I know The Last of Us is getting its own HBO Max adaptation in a couple of weeks. So, in terms of movies, I think Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is the best one. And I'm excited for Sonic 3, although we know it's not going to keep its release date, because Sonic 3 coming out the same day as Avatar 3, it's not going to make the money that people think it will. So I predict Sonic the Hedgehog 3 will move to another date, either sooner or later. Whatever the case may be, I'm looking forward to it. April 8th, 2022 was certainly a surprising weekend for movies, and I'm so grateful that both Ambulance and Sonic the Hedgehog 2 were as enjoyable as they were. I wouldn't have thought that in a million years, but here we are. But now let's actually talk about the movies that are on my best of list. What are the 15 movies that I loved in 2022? Well, without further ado, let's start things off with number 15. The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. The trailer really sold us on the fact that this was going to be a buddy comedy with Nicolas Cage playing a fictionalized version of himself, and boy is it a delight. Both Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal have fantastic chemistry, the dialogue's great, it's got a really fun script, and these two actors certainly steal the show. There are a lot of sequences throughout this movie that had me laughing hard. If there was anything I didn't like, and I mentioned this in my review, I think Tiffany Haddish and Ike Barinholtz don't really work in the movie. Their roles would have been more perfect had they been played by more serious actors, because it would have lent to the comedy a lot more. But with what we got, it's really enjoyable. Number 14. The Black Phone. It's creepy, it has a very sinister tone to it, no pun intended, considering that this was directed by Scott Derrickson and co-written by him and C. Robert Cargill, who made Sinister. Ethan Hawke is just so creepy as the grabber. All the kid actors are really good. It just left me with a real unnerving feeling throughout the entire movie. It had me on the edge of my seat. And if this is the lower tier of my favorite horror movies of 2022, then the rest of the movies on this list are just even better, including number 13. Nope. After a really great first movie with Get Out and a slightly underwhelming yet somewhat effective follow-up with Us, Nope is probably Jordan Peele's most accessible movie. And I mean that in the sense that it's not as deep as the other movies. It's essentially a monster movie. It really does feature a lot of similarities to Jaws. The monster is not really shown on screen for a whole lot. It's shrouded in mystery. The movie essentially follows a small group of characters who are trying to hunt down this thing and destroy it. Daniel Kaluuya and Keke Palmer work really great together playing brother and sister, and Keke Palmer is certainly the big standout of this movie. I wish I'd seen it in true IMAX, like at Universal City Walk, because it would fill up the entire screen. But this is still a really fantastic movie that I kind of pity you if you didn't see it in theaters, or at the very least in IMAX. Number 12. Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. After sitting through the horrendous nature that is the Robert Zemeckis Disney Plus Pinocchio remake, Guillermo del Toro's adaptation of The Wooden Boy is really different. It's out there, but it still manages to maintain that dark, demented tone that the book is known for. The stop-motion animation is gorgeous, the character designs are amazing, the score is really good, and all the actors, especially Ewan McGregor as Sebastian J. Cricket, give it their all. And the only reason that this movie is lower on my list is because the Robert Zemeckis movie just kind of tainted my interest in Pinocchio this year. So while this movie is really good, it's not like high up there. It's not in the top 5 for me like it is for a lot of other people. Another movie that isn't as high on my list as everyone else's is number 11. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Speaking of critically acclaimed movies that aren't as high on my list as they are in everyone else's lists, this movie is certainly original, it's creative, it's the best multiverse movie that we have this year. Sorry, Doctor Strange, but this beats you out. It's got a stacked cast with terrific acting from Michelle Yeoh, Ke-Huy Quan, Stephanie Hsu, James Hong, and Jamie Lee Curtis. The action is inspired, you can see everything that's going on, it's really bug nuts insane, which kind of is a small fault of the movie for me, is that it's so insane that it's sometimes hard to keep track of in terms of the world it's building, the story that it's trying to tell, but it's still very enjoyable at the end of the day. And if this movie really is in the running for Best Picture at the Oscars like everyone else says it is, I have no complaints. Number 10. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Sure, the MCU has not had their best year in 2022, but luckily it was rectified by ending the year with Werewolf by Night, the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, and this movie, Wakanda Forever. Making a sequel to one of the biggest Marvel movies ever, especially considering that Chadwick Boseman is no longer with us, was a daunting task. But this movie made it not only a worthy follow-up, but a fantastic tribute to Chadwick Boseman himself. Letitia Wright is great as ever as Shuri. She really steps up from being a supporting character to being the main character. Angela Bassett gives an Oscar-worthy performance. The special effects are infinitely better than they were in the first Black Panther, even with seeing it in 3D, which this movie was not made for. It's just a really good movie all around. Definitely a great way to end Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the multiverse saga. Now, before I get into the top 9, one of the other reasons I wanted to make a top 15 list rather than simply a top 10 is because the next 4 movies on this list come in pairs of 2. The next few movies are so linked to each other and equally as good as the other that I wanted to give other movies a time to shine. I didn't want almost half of this list to be dedicated to what are essentially 2 awesome double features. So let's continue on with number 9. X. This was my first exposure to Ty West as a director, and it's a really good first introduction for me because X is a very bonkers, very crazy, yet very effective slasher movie. It definitely reminded me of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre mixed with elements of the Friday the 13th series, where you actually care about what's going on, but there's no shortage of gore, amazing kills, nudity, and I like how this movie, upon watching it again, really breaks a lot of stereotypes that you see in horror. The assumed final girl doesn't make it to the end. All the people that actually get naked and have sex and do drugs are actually really caring for one another. The main villains of the movie are just a bunch of creepy old people that you don't think about as much, but thanks to another movie that came out later this year, you get a much larger understanding of why these villains are the way they are. And Mia Goth absolutely steals the show as both Maxine, the main character who ends up getting away at the end, and the villain of the movie, Pearl. And it took me a long time to realize that the old lady Pearl was actually Mia Goth in old makeup. Like, that is incredible right there. And if it wasn't for the Academy's stigma against horror movies, and if it wasn't for the Academy being so stuck up when it comes to the horror genre, there's no doubt that this movie would be up for best makeup. But speaking of Pearl, number 8. Pearl. I had no idea that this movie was being made in secret at the same time as X, and in my opinion, Pearl is the superior movie. I think it's a lot more creepy, it's more character-based, and that's good because the movie actually tricks you with this whimsical, early 20th century vibe to it. It has elements that make you think of The Wizard of Oz, but then it goes full-blown psycho with Mia Goth as the younger version of Pearl. And again, it makes me so mad that the Academy is kind of stuck up when it comes to the horror genre, because Mia Goth in this movie deserves to be in the same conversation with people like Michelle Yeoh in Everything Everywhere All at Once, or Cate Blanchett in Tar. She is that good in this movie, and in a perfect world, she would be in the running for Best Actress. I absolutely love both these movies, X and Pearl. I'm excited to see Maxine whenever that comes out, but for my money, Pearl is the better of the two movies. And now on to the next double feature. Number 7. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I figured this movie would be decent when I saw the trailers because the animation style definitely sold me, and I enjoyed the last Puss in Boots movie even though I don't love it the way I did the first two Shrek movies. This movie is absolutely gorgeous. The animation is stunning, and it's a much more emotional movie in terms of Puss in Boots as a character. There's a lot of stakes this time around, more than the original. Some of the jokes don't work as effectively as they do in the first two Shrek movies, but this isn't a comedy in the same way the Shrek movies are. The action is absolutely spectacular. It's got a really great message about trying to not lean on the past too much and move forward with your life and enjoy what you have. It's got a fantastic villain with the wolf, aka Death. There's just so much I love about this movie. If I had any negatives about this movie, and it's not even towards the movie itself, I think that all the praise it's getting is kind of undermining another DreamWorks movie that came out earlier last year. Number 6. The Bad Guys. Now, I know that animated films take a much longer time to develop than live-action movies, so there's no way that Puss in Boots: The Last Wish was made as a result of The Bad Guys. The Bad Guys came first, and thanks to the new animation style that DreamWorks is adapting thanks to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, we wouldn't have had Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. What makes The Bad Guys work a lot better for me is more the art style. It's distinctive compared to other DreamWorks movies. I think the humor works infinitely better. It's definitely more energized, it's more action-packed, it's clever, it's got some fun sight gags. I just found this movie really enjoyable, and like I said several times in my review for this movie and Puss in Boots, DreamWorks is about to give Disney and Pixar a run for their money, and I cannot wait to see the rest of the movies that they make from this point on. Number 5. Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. I was so excited for this movie because I love the first Knives Out, but I was so upset that this was being released to Netflix. Thankfully, I got the chance to see it in theaters, so I didn't miss out on that experience. And I don't like this movie as much as I do the first Knives Out, but it's still very clever, it's well scripted, the cast that Rian Johnson got together is phenomenal, Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc is just as great as ever. The rest of the cast, like Ed Norton, Kate Hudson, Janelle Monáe, Dave Bautista, all of them do a fantastic job. And I can't wait to see more of the adventures of Benoit Blanc in the future. Number 4. Weird: The Al Yankovic Story, the 100% factual biopic of one of my favorite musicians ever. That's not true at all, but that doesn't mean that this movie isn't great. It pretty much has the same tone as Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story. It's comedic, it's completely fictionalized. There are a few moments in the movie that are pretty accurate to what happened in Al's life, like how he came up with the song My Bologna. But everything else about the movie is completely fictionalized, and that just makes the comedy even better because it's absurd, it's insane. Daniel Radcliffe as Weird Al Yankovic is so good. He does a fantastic job at being a young Weird Al, even though it's pretty clear that when he's singing the music, it's Weird Al dubbing in for Daniel Radcliffe. I wish there was a way that we could get this on Blu-ray because I want to see this movie without all the ad interruptions. But then again, this being released on Roku seemed like the most Weird Al way for this movie to be presented. Number 3. Avatar: The Way of Water. One of the reasons why I wanted to get a spoiler review for Avatar: The Way of Water out before I did any of these best of and worst of lists is because this movie, despite my initial reaction of it being good but not great, made it to my best of the year list. It's not a sequel that surpasses the original like Aliens and Terminator 2 did, but it's still really, really good regardless. James Cameron really knows this world inside and out. There's so much detail to it, and I just love being in this world for a good 2.5 to 3 hours. I think the characters are a lot better this time around. Jake Sully is more mature. Sam Worthington does a much better job acting in this movie than he did in most of his career, and I like him in the first Avatar. Just the scene alone in the spirit tree near the end of the movie when Jake Sully sees the younger version of Neteyam after his funeral, and he says, "I'm just happy to see you." That is a testament to how good Sam Worthington can be if under the direction of a director like James Cameron. The action is spectacular. The train heist at the beginning of the movie, the eclipse sequence in the rainforest, and even though in the big final battle at the end of the movie, the Metkayina just kind of disappear, the rest is still fantastic, especially when the second eclipse comes around and the Sullys are pretty much after Quaritch as revenge for the death of Neteyam. It's great. I can't wait for the rest of these Avatar sequels, and it makes me so happy that this movie's making the amount of money as it is to show that you don't bet against James Cameron. Like, guys, we've had 2 previous conversations about this happening with Titanic and the first movie. Why did you want to be wrong for a 3rd time? After being wrong for a 3rd time, and with Avatar 3 actually coming out in December of next year, 2024, I don't want to see any more excuses on how Avatar is going to flop or no one cares about it, because that is total nonsense. Number 2. Prey. In my opinion, the best horror movie of 2022, and another movie like Weird that I wish would get a Blu-ray release. That's the only disappointment I have with this movie being a Hulu original, because it deserves to be on a big screen, and it's a movie that I want to own in my collection right next to the first Predator movie. If you haven't seen my original review, go check it out, but essentially this is an entire movie based off the final act of the first Predator, where our main character doesn't have any advanced weaponry. They have to rely on their surroundings, their athletic nature, and their intelligence and wit to outsmart this extraterrestrial hunter. Amber Midthunder as Naro is a fantastic lead. You can tell just based on her introduction that she's an excellent tracker, she knows her surroundings like the back of her hand, and she's prepared to take on any threat. Because while she's smaller than the rest of the people in her tribe, and certainly smaller than Dutch in the first Predator, she's got the wits. So she is infinitely smarter than the Predator in this movie, and that's not to put down the Predator itself, who is terrifying. This is a great redesign of the Yautja aliens that we're so familiar with, but not a radical redesign in a way where it doesn't even resemble the Predators. And I also just love the concept of making Predator movies set in different time periods. It doesn't have to be a continuous story. Let's just have one-off movies based on the Predators visiting Earth at different points in time. That would be fantastic to see going forward, and hopefully with as good as this movie is, the rest of the sequels end up getting theatrical releases. And now we come to my number 1 pick. This is a movie that almost held the slot for the biggest surprise of 2022, but based on who's in the movie and his previous films, I kind of had a suspicion that it would be good. But even then, I was not at all prepared to be as blown away as I was by number 1. Top Gun Maverick. I enjoyed the first Top Gun from 1986. It's stupid, it's corny, but it's got some great aerial photography, it's got some iconic sequences, and even though I didn't grow up with the movie, it was second-handedly responsible for my love in fighter jets. Top Gun Maverick, on the other hand, is everything that the first movie is, but done infinitely better. The flight sequences just melt your brain in terms of how amazing they are, in terms of shooting it, the intensity, the action is just spectacular. That whole trench run, which it's essentially the trench run from Star Wars, had me on the edge of my seat. The sequence near the end of the movie where Maverick and Rooster have to escape the 5th gen fighters in an F-14 really had me biting my nails. Every action scene in this movie puts me on the edge of my seat. And what makes those action scenes even more spectacular is that you care about the characters. I really enjoyed the new pilots like Rooster, Hangman, Bob, Phoenix, Payback, Fanboy, Coyote. Tom Cruise is just as good as ever, and his dynamic with Rooster is compelling. Both Miles Teller and Tom Cruise really do a fantastic job at selling the surrogate father story. Jon Hamm is good as the Admiral. Jennifer Connelly is fantastic. The relationship between her and Tom Cruise worked out. And after watching this movie several times and looking back at the first Top Gun, I realized, oh, these two characters actually did meet. In fact, Penny was mentioned at the beginning of the first Top Gun. She's basically, if I'm correct, she's Admiral Strickland's daughter. I don't know the actual character's name, but it's from the same actor who played Principal Strickland in Back to the Future. So that was a nice Easter egg that only the hardcore Top Gun fans would get. There's not much else to say about this movie. I absolutely adore it. And to give you an emphasis on how much I love this movie, I normally like to wait for movies to come out on Blu-ray before I actually get a digital copy of it. But because Top Gun Maverick came out in digital about 2 months before the Blu-ray release, I said, screw it, I'm buying it on digital on YouTube, and then I'm buying it again on Blu-ray. So I spent a good almost $50 to buy Top Gun at home. And for my money, considering that this is my favorite movie of 2022, that was $50 well spent on a movie that I love twice. So, Top Gun Maverick. If you haven't seen this, what are you doing? You have no excuse not to see this movie. It's a movie that you will watch and you will hate yourself for not seeing it earlier. And there you go. Those are my picks for the top 15 movies of 2022. And with that comes the end of the Real Mr. Robinson era. 7 years of going by the name The Real Mr. Robinson on this channel has been a pretty good run. But I think it's time for me to just drop that all together and go by my actual name. So Alexander Robinson will be the name of the channel from here on out. Expect those changes to be up by tomorrow. And yeah, I'm excited for this year. It's the 10th anniversary of this channel. I have a lot more videos to review. I'm excited for the rest of the movies to come out in 2023. And thank you guys for tuning in. 10 years on this channel has been nuts, and that anniversary will come April 20th. I don't know what I have in store for my 10th anniversary, but I'll think of something. In fact, I'll actually create a post on this channel's community tab in terms of suggestions from you guys on what to do on my 10th anniversary. So you can go over to the community tab and check that out for yourself. But as for this comment section, I want to know what you guys think about this best of the year list. If you've seen any of the movies on this list, what did you think? What are your favorite movies of 2022? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, go check out my Twitch channel, and support me on Patreon. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day and take care of yourselves.